And Mr. Harper has said to the Canadian public that he is a family man, that he stands for family values. Mr. Abdelrazik has told me that he has a family, and his family is here, and in fact, his 5-year-old son is here today, and you're going to see him, you're going to meet him, and he wants his father back. So we have a situation here, ladies and gentlemen, where a Canadian citizen has been detained or was detained in another country at the behest of our government. Today, we are here urging the Canadian government, urging Mr. Harper to make good on a promise that his government made in April of this year. That is to say, if a travel itinerary could be obtained through a commercial airliner, that an emergency travel document would issue and the government of Canada would immediately repatriate Mr. Abdelrazik. On August 26th of this year, we obtained such a travel itinerary through Etihad Airlines. That was forwarded to the government of Canada, and for the last 2 weeks, there's been silence. What we obtained yesterday from the Department of Justice was an acknowledgement that that travel itinerary is being given active consideration. Now, we're here at a very pivotal moment in the case of Mr. Abdelrazik, because based on the response of the Canadian government, he may or may not be able to come back to Canada on the date of his travel itinerary, which is September 15th. That is to say, if Mr. Harper makes good on his promise, then Mr. Abdelrazik may be back in this country in 3 days. This is a very important moment, and everyone who's here, everyone who's out here today, is part of the process of bringing a public profile to this case at this historical juncture. Why for Mr. Abdelrazik, a person who has not been convicted of any crime, who has not faced any kind of formal indictment, why this government continues to refuse to repatriate him? And so I urge you all, there are some postcards here today. Sign those postcards. Make your message known to Mr. Harper. Make your message known to Mr. Emerson that we will not tolerate a system of two-tiered citizenship. We will not tolerate this system of institutional racism. We will not tolerate the marginalization of Canadian Muslims and minorities in this country.
It is a shame that the government does not help in securing the return of Abousfian to his family in Canada. The democratic government cannot hide behind secrecy to justify its actions or inaction. I have heard about the case of Abousfian last spring from the newspaper. His story is a tragedy of a human being living far from his home and his family in Canada, inside the Canadian embassy in Sudan. But also, it is another tragedy to add to the ones where the Canadian government did not do much to help protect the right of one of its citizens abroad. It is extremely disturbing to me, to many Canadians, to know that this government still leaves this citizen in a limbo. He cannot come back to the country where he has family, kids, where he used to live because of some nebulous suspicion. This is not how we can build a solid democratic system where everyone, regardless of the suspicions, rumors, allegations, he can have the right to a due process. As far as I know, there is no Canadian law that prevents citizens to come back home.
The fact that we are in an election cannot be an excuse for the Harper government to abandon one of our citizens. This is not the only case, as you know. Bashir Maktal is another Canadian citizen languishing in Ethiopia, again abandoned by the Harper government. What we are calling on our government to do is to not engage in what I call selective citizenship. I want to echo what has already been stated, that Mr. Abdelrazik has a family right beside me here, one of his kids. I'm a father. Mr. Harper's a father. He claims that, you know, family is important. Well, why is it that we decide in some cases families are important and in other cases they aren't? You can't be selective. You must be consistent. Canadian citizens demand it. It is exactly the values that we trumpet around the world. Next to us, of course, is the Monument for Human Rights. Perhaps it's fitting that right now it is being renovated. We're in the middle of an election. Sadly, our human rights record abroad is falling apart. It needs to be renovated. And if Mr. Harper's not willing to do it, then he should remove himself, get out of the way, and allow those who want to rehabilitate Canada's record in the world to do so.
As the run-up to this election has shown, it seems that lately it's more about characterizations and innuendo than character and integrity. The time has come for our elected officials and their rivals to show and to part ways with the do nothing, say nothing, or even worse, say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing policies of the past. To stop passing the buck, to stop the politics, the posturing, the positioning, and instead act on principle and purpose in line with our charter values. Abousfian Abdelrazik is a Canadian citizen and deserves to have his rights, his inalienable rights, due process, habeas corpus, and the presumption of innocence to be protected and put into practice by this Canadian government. Canadian Muslims, indeed all Canadians of conscience, demand and deserve no less. As other speakers have highlighted, we need only look at the case of Brenda Martin, a case where an individual was actually charged and convicted, to see the difference in how Abousfian has been treated. In Martin's case, we had doubts about the process that led to her incarceration, and as a result advocated strongly to bring her back and were successful. In Abousfian's case, here we have an individual who hasn't even been charged, indicted or convicted, and who is essentially living in a legal vacuum.
Good afternoon, friends. CAPCA is very, very disturbed at the racist application of laws concerning Abousfian Abdelrazik. We've seen so many of these cases so far that we are puzzled as to why yet another Canadian citizen not being treated equally in due course with the law. We call for the repatriation of Abousfian Abdelrazik as soon as possible and call on the Harper government to stop undermining our civil rights and our human rights and our civil liberties.
We're here today to support these 38 organizations are here to support the call to bring back Mr. Abdelrazik to Canada without any further delay or excuses. We strongly denounce the actions of the Canadian government and Canadian officials in this case and the distortion of facts it has used to justify its inaction. The story of Mr. Abdelrazik is only one more in a series of cases that points to a systematic or systemic pattern of violations of human rights perpetuated by Canada in its submission to the United States regarding security matters since 9/11. This government says it's strong on law and order, but it surely appears to have little consideration for the rule of law and democratic principle of fundamental justice. This is not the Canada people want in this country. We ask Canada to bring back Mr. Abdelrazik and reverse that trend. Thank you.
My dad comes sometimes. He does bring me presents like gifts, and he brings me toys that are very nice. And I love my dad. I want to see him. I miss him so much.